The architecture of spiritual confinement, a deep dive. When you hear the phrase, the gates of hell, what pops into your head? Probably a fiery, demonic fortress, right? An army of monsters marching out to attack the world. But what if we've been getting it completely wrong for 2,000 years? What if the gates of hell aren't a physical place, or an army of demons, but a highly advanced, self-generated trap built entirely inside your own mind? To understand this, we need to travel down a fascinating rabbit hole. We are going to connect the dots between the New Testament, ancient Hellenistic astrology, and hardcore occult magic to reveal the secret architecture of spiritual confinement. And more importantly, we are going to look at the exact operational mechanics required to break out of it. The cosmic blind spot and the Kakodaimon. To understand the trap, we first have to look at ancient Greece. Originally, a daimon was just a neutral guiding spirit. But as Greek philosophy evolved, they split the concept into two poles, the agathodaimon, the noble, higher spirit, and the Kakodaimon, the adversarial, lower spirit. The Kakodaimon represented the internalized forces of malice, chaos, and self-sabotage that live inside us. When Hellenistic astrology came along, it codified this psychological shadow into the physical architecture of the cosmos. The 12 houses of the natal chart were assigned specific powers, and the 12th house was explicitly named the Kakodaimon. Because of where the 12th house sits geometrically, just behind the ascendant, which represents your conscious identity and the horizon, planets there are mathematically falling backward into a cosmic blind spot. In astrology, the 12th house is in aversion to the ascendant, meaning your conscious ego literally cannot see what is inside it. It governs isolation, unresolved trauma, self-undoing, and what the Greeks called hyperenantios, your secret enemies. But these aren't external foes. The true hyperenantios is an adversarial force that holds a structural advantage over your mind because it operates from behind your line of sight. It is your own unpurified nature. Furthermore, the 12th house is the planetary joy of Saturn, Kronos, the architect of gravity, limitation, and debt. The Kakodaimon isn't just an abstract shadow, it's a holding cell governed by the crushing weight of karma. The lesser guardian of the threshold. In esoteric traditions like anthroposophy, formalized by Rudolf Steiner, this shadow takes on a life of its own. It becomes the lesser guardian of the threshold. Imagine a terrifying cosmic bouncer standing between you and higher spiritual awakening. But this bouncer isn't an alien demon. It's made entirely out of your accumulated thoughts, unrefined desires, fears, and unmet karma. Its whole job is to act as an automated defense system. It intentionally dampens your perception, diverting your focus to the mundane sensory world, because if you, with an unpurified ego, were to gaze upon the raw reality of the spiritual realm and your own dark lower nature, it would shatter your psyche. When an unprepared initiate tries to cross the threshold, the guardian weaponizes their own trauma against them, driving them back to safety. The Granthic knot and Typhonian Gematria. What gives this guardian its solidity and holding power? In Typhonian occultism, mapped out by Kenneth Grant, this locking mechanism is called the Granti, a Sanskrit term for knot. This psychic knot tricks your consciousness into identifying entirely with your physical shell and your localized tribal inheritance. Grant refers to this false identity as projecting a mirage in the desert of Set. To cross the threshold, or navigate the abyss of death on the Kabbalistic tree, you cannot defeat the guardian through magical combat. The guardian dissolves only when the energetic knots of pride and fear that give it substance are completely untangled. Grant even mapped the mechanics of untying this knot using Gematria. In Hebrew, the phrase YHVH Echad, the Lord is one, equates to the number 39. This represents the day side, the divine supernal forces pulling consciousness upward. However, surviving the abyss requires acting upon the mirror reflection of 39, which is 93. In the tradition of Thelema, both will, Thelema, and divine love, agape, calculate to 93. By applying the unified force of will and love, 93, the seeker aggressively acts upon the dayside reflection, 39, actively untying the Granthic knot and forcing the Kakodaimon to yield the keys. decoding the gates of Hades. When we take this esoteric architecture and lay it over the New Testament, the parallels are flawless. In Matthew 16 verse 18, Jesus declares that the gates of hell, pylai hadou, shall not prevail against his church. Here's the thing about ancient architecture: gates aren't offensive weapons. They don't march onto a battlefield. Gates are structural mechanisms of absolute containment. They are designed to lock intruders out, but more importantly, to lock prisoners in. The pylai hadou represent the psychic perimeter wall of the lower cosmos. They are structurally identical to the Hellenistic 12th house. The gates of Hades do not attack. They stand as the immovable threshold designed to trap human consciousness in a perpetual loop of spiritual infancy. The ancestral egregore and the dug hole. This containment matrix is fueled by an ancestral egregore, an autonomous, collective thought form generated by the shared beliefs, dogmas, and tribal momentum of a specific group over generations. In biblical typology, this matrix is encapsulated by Jacob's well. The Greek word for the well is phreer, which signifies a dug hole, an artificial pit. A phreer does not generate living water. It merely pools and seals the stagnant historical water of previous generations. It feeds the carnal, herd mentality, the threma or livestock. To drink solely from the phreer is to remain trapped behind the gates of Hades, mistaking cultural conditioning for spiritual truth. It keeps you in a state of passive spiritual infancy, known in Greek as the nepios, a simple infant lacking any legal or spiritual standing. The Paidion loop and the Roman impluvium. When an individual trapped in this matrix tries to climb out using sheer human willpower, intellectual striving, or moral perfectionism, things get violent. They transition from the passive ignorance of the nepios into the frantic cycle of the Paidion. The Greek word paidion, child, traces back to the root paio, which explicitly means to strike, smite, or wound. A paidion is a child under the bruising whip of trial and error, paideia. The ego, bound by its Granthic knot, tries to climb the wall, encounters the lesser guardian, the gates of Hades, and is automatically struck back down, paio, into the pit. The person thinks, if I just try harder I'll make it, not realizing the wall is specifically designed to beat them down. Architecturally, this forms what the Romans called an impluvium, a sunken basin in the floor meant to pool rainwater. The soul is caught in a crushing vice. The hidden momentum of their unrefined lower nature pushes them blindly forward from behind, a tergo, while the lesser guardian acts as an immovable wall holding the boundary in front, a fronte. The soul pools in the 12th house impluvium, trapped in the bruising gravity of Saturn. Deliverance, poneros and roamai. The Lord's Prayer offers the exact operational formula for escaping this trap. Deliver us from evil. But we have to look at the Greek words to see the mechanics. In the New Testament, kakos refers to evil in character, something base or foul. But the word used here is poneros. Poneros comes from ponos, which means labor, painful exertion, or hardship. Poneros is a malignant, active evil, an exhausting cancer. It is the exhausting hamster wheel of the Paidion loop. The petitioner is asking to be freed from the agonizing, useless labor of trying to scale spiritual walls with their ego. And the word for deliver is roamai. Roamai doesn't mean to passively guide. It means to forcefully drag, snatch, or violently draw someone to oneself. It carries the imagery of a soldier running onto a battlefield to drag a wounded comrade from imminent death. Because the gravity of the 12th house is so dense, a gentle salvation won't work. The soul must be violently dislocated from the gravitational pull of its own baggage. The Great Escape, starving the guardian. So how do we pull off the breakout? You can't fight the guardian. Fighting it with your lower energy just feeds it. You have to starve it. In the New Testament, this is the daily cross, the systematic denial of your lower, survival-driven soul life, your psyche. By consciously refusing to act upon base impulses, you alter your gravitational center. You stop operating out of the dualistic tree of knowledge and shift into the undivided tree of life, Zoe. The raw power of the monster is pulled out of the 12th house, purified, and elevated. Simultaneously, you execute a strategic strike against the external ancestral egregore using the alpha privative, alpha, the supreme Greek prefix of negation. You systematically strip away, unlearn, and negate the inherited vocabulary and dogmas of the historical freer. Stripped of its internal shadow and its external anchors in reality, the Granthic knot unties. The lesser guardian loses its mirror reflection and evaporates. The gates of Hades collapse. The individual steps away from the dug hole and accesses the internal artesian spring, Pij, maturing into the Huios, a fully manifested sun, and unlocking epignosis, a precise, experiential recognition of divine truth that renders the old tribal egregore obsolete. The dawn and the garment exchange. With the matrix shattered, a profound internal event occurs. 2 Peter 1 verse 19 says, "Until the day dawn, and the day star arise in your hearts." The Greek word for day star is phosphoros, the light bringer, the planet Venus on the horizon. In esoteric magic and Alexandrian Hermeticism, this internal dawn is the activation of the agoids, the immortal, starry vehicle of the soul. The luminous body of pure, uncorrupted light. When the phosphoros arises in the heart, the heavy karmic shell of the Kakodaimon is completely vaporized by the sheer brilliance of the agoids. The Apostle Peter anchored this teaching in his memory of the Transfiguration. Structurally, the Transfiguration maps perfectly to the magical assumption of the god form in Western ceremonial magic, isolation, the visual shift in the aura/garments, the invocation of divine ancestry, and the permanent alteration of the practitioner. Early Valentinian Gnostics interpreted the Transfiguration not as a literal historical trick, but as the ultimate garment exchange. We are forced to wear heavy, suffocating garments of skin, our physical flesh, ego illusion, and the limiting laws of the lower matrix. The Transfiguration is the blueprint for stepping out of these earthly rags and putting on your original, celestial vestment of pure spiritual gnosis. However, the Valentinians taught that humanity isn't uniform. There are three capacities of soul, dictating how we react to this blinding light. 1. Choic, hylic tied entirely to physical matter. They are blind to the spiritual light, experiencing it only as disruption. Their ultimate destiny is dissolution back into the material void. 2. Psychic, tied to the ego mind and dogma. They experience awe and terror at the light, seeing it as an external authority to be feared, like the disciples falling on their faces. Their salvation is through faith into a middle heavenly realm. 3. Pneumatic, operating via the divine spirit. They possess epignosis, direct self-recognition. When they see the blinding light on the mountain, they don't see an exterior power to worship. They recognize it as their own long-lost mirror image, their native celestial garment. Their destiny is total unification with the divine fullness. Conclusion. The architecture of spiritual confinement is universally consistent. The unpurified soul generates a shadow, the Kakodaimon, which creates the cosmic blind spot of the 12th house. This defensive matrix acts as the gates of Hades, utilizing the lesser guardian to trap us in a bruising, exhausting loop of self-sabotage, poneros. Deliverance requires a radical, gravitational rescue, romai, paired with our own internal transformation. We must starve the ego through the daily cross, demolish the inherited dogma, and untie the Granthic knot. When we do, the guardian evaporates, the gates fall, and the morning star, the agoids, rises in the heart. The command to overcome the gates of hell is ultimately the exact same imperative as the esoteric command to cross the abyss and put on the luminous garment of the transfigured divine.